Welcome to the Oldmansailing Book Club. Today we're going to start the voyage number 3, Panama to the Isle of Man. Dedication. This book is for Eric. You'll find out why. Epigraph. Disasters about to happen do not trouble the minds of those too dim to imagine them. Oldmansailing. Forward. Somewhat absurdly, this book got started before the last one got finished. I was 4 days short of arriving in Carriacou at the end of the voyage number 2, Falmouth to Grenada, and I had just finished reading Wave Walker by Susan Haywood. This is the traumatic story of her childhood growing up on her parents' 50-foot schooner, deprived of friends and schooling, and forced to act as her mother's kitchen maid. At one point, after hitting her head in a storm, she was made to undergo 7 brain operations on a remote island without anesthetic. And all this at the age of 7. It's the kind of book that leaves an impression. And one of the impressions was of their visit to Tristan da Cunha, the tiny lump of volcanic rock midway between Argentina and South Africa. I had heard of Tristan da Cunha. I remembered the eruption of 1961 when the entire population had to be evacuated, and a lot of the younger people didn't want to go back again once they'd seen what the rest of the world had to offer. I was so bound up in the story that I determined then and there, bowling along under twin headsails, the steering held together with string, that I, too, would sail to Tristan da Cunha. I even planned the route, an enormous figure of 8 encompassing both the North and South Atlantic. The trouble with an exercise like that is that it becomes a commitment. To change your mind would be, in some way, chickening out. Of course, it would mean yet another Atlantic crossing. I wasn't going to beat into the southeast trades for 2,000 miles, and it would be necessary to arrive in the middle of the southern summer. Then there was the hurricane season in the Caribbean to consider, and among all these natural time constraints, there was the idiocy of Brexit. As a UK citizen, I was now limited to no more than 90 days out of every 180 in the EU. The problem was that, as usual, anything that appears even remotely difficult immediately acquires a frisson of excitement. Over the ensuing 2 years, I couldn't leave it alone. The foreword that I began on that passage to Grenada grew and grew. I've just tried to edit it. It was longer than any of the chapters, constantly contradicting itself as I thrashed out the itinerary, and then had to start all over again to incorporate family holidays and my son Owen's wedding. Quite apart from Central America. If you think cruising the Caribbean is the sailor's heaven, wait until you get to Panama. And now people tell me it's not a patch on Costa Rica, and you must visit Honduras and the Bay of Islands. Cuba is still unspoiled, but see it now before it changes forever. I remember one particular day in the Limon Keys of the San Blas Islands. I had spent the morning sitting under Samsara's enormous awning. Rafael in Santa Marta took so long to make it that I had to cancel my Spanish lessons in Cartagena. I had filled a whole page of a notebook with distances and timings, cross-referenced possible departure dates with the family's skiing holiday. Some things are sacrosanct. I was feeling overwhelmed with all the detail and decided I need a break. Now, if you need a break, you're in the right place in the San Blas Islands. They're just sand and palm trees. some of them so small that there might only be one indigenous schooner family eking out a living from the sea as their ancestors have for the last 500 years. Only now they take their dugout canoes and sell lobster and their intricately sewn molars to the yachties. Better still, in the Limon Keys, on one particular island called Yerba, there is quite the most excellent restaurant, and certainly the best pina colada west of Punta Galinas. The secret is to serve it in its own pineapple skin. I was on my way there, and just crossing the stern of the only other boat in the anchorage, when the skipper looked up and noticed my new electric outboard. It's called a Remigo, and doesn't look like any outboard anyone has ever seen before. This means it's a conversation starter. The skipper turned out to be an American called Lou. His boat was a catamaran, the size of a modest Manhattan apartment. He had been persuaded to buy it, rather than something more manageable, by a woman who said she wanted to sail around the world with him, and then changed her mind about the whole project, as well as Lou. He looked longingly at my little boat, was amazed that I'd come all the way from England. He joined me for lunch. It turned out to be one of those 5-hour lunches, and I never did get any further with my planning. He thought he might stay where he was. He's probably still there. I did meet a German who had lived on his boat in the San Blas for 8 years. So it wasn't until I was sitting with the family on a restaurant terrace at the foot of the Matterhorn that the plan came together. I had proposed that we would meet again in July in the Azores after my escape from the hurricane season, but before I could head south for Christmas. "Oh no," said Tamsin. She was going to Hanoi to visit Lottie. Lottie was teaching English to Vietnamese children. Tamsin wouldn't have enough holiday from her new job to spend a week with me as well. Where else was I going? Well, I did like Ireland. There were people around the table who had never been to Ireland. Also, unlike the rest of the EU, Dublin has a free travel agreement with the UK, so I wouldn't be using up my stupid Brexit allowance. At first glance, this allowed me to stop in Cuba and visit my niece in the Bahamas. And then Donald Trump announced that he already had troops in Panama ready to take back the canal. I could see myself getting trapped by a state of emergency. And what would happen if ICE took one look at my blog and some of the posts about the orange one? I would be shipped off to El Salvador before you could say, "Make America Great Again." I looked up the price of a Bahamian cruising permit and crossed the Bahamas off the list. An Australian told me about Cuban customs officers so hard up they confiscate all your food and booze. That was when I happened to notice a random item that the Isle of Man TT was due to start at the beginning of June. I had never seen the TT. I tried once, but it rained. If you're not familiar with this extraordinary event, it is billed as the most dangerous race in the world. Motorcyclists roaring around 37 miles of public roads at speeds up to 180 miles an hour, through town squares, up and down mountains, 200 corners. They say that every year somebody dies, although that's not quite true. But it does draw thousands of motorbike enthusiasts from all over the world. And me. I had a BSA Bantam once. I nearly killed myself on Streatham High Road. I wouldn't dream of riding a motorcycle now. But if I left Panama immediately and averaged 100 miles a day for 50 days, I could get there for the last race. And the Isle of Man is only a day's sail from Dublin. Besides, it would give a purpose to the voyage. It would be good copy. It would be a race of my own. Day 0-1. The False Start. Monday, April the 14th. Panama, Panama. After falling asleep at 9 o'clock last night, a combination of jet lag, returning to the no-lunch regime and starting to cook dinner at 6:30, not to mention 2 cans of Balboa and 2 glasses of rum, I woke up raring to go. I would leave this evening, nip round to Linton Bay in time for Fausto to open his immigration office, a quick trip to the fuel station to stock up with beer, then Charlie's produce container for fresh veg, collect the new iPad from Felipe. I could be gone by dark. Now for the arithmetic. The most direct route from Linton to Castletown is 5,166 miles. At my usual 90 miles a day, that works out at 57 days, or 8.2 weeks. Call it 2 months. So, depart April the 14th, arrive June the 11th. Too late. The TT fortnight ends on June the 7th. So, how many miles a day would I need to make good to get there for the last day? Arrive on the evening of June the 6th. Answer, 99.3. Call it 100. 5,166 miles. I could be there on the Friday morning with 2 days of the action still to go, in case it rains on one of them. But what if I didn't go through the Bahamas, but round them to the west? That would save 10 miles. More to the point, I would have 200 miles in the Gulf Stream. It's 2.5 knot current in my favour, and the prevailing wind on the beam. That's a couple of 150-mile days right there. Of course, I'm not sure how dangerous it is to sail in the Gulf Stream. The first thing I was going to do when I got the iPad was buy Jimmy Cornell's World Cruising Routes. But now, I'm not so sure. It costs £150 on Kindle, and I've just bought a lot of lunches for 6 people in mountain restaurants. Besides, surely I can find the information online for nothing. I looked up sailing in the Gulf Stream. Any northerly component in the wind turns 1-meter waves into 2-meter waves. Violent thunderstorms with high winds appear out of nowhere. There is heavy traffic with large vessels on autopilot, yachts crossing from Florida to the Bahamas, inexperienced crews in chartered high-speed fishing boats. I can decide when I get there. So, I did indeed get up early and nipped round to Linton Bay before Fausto closed his immigration office at 11. The trouble is, he can't issue my exit permit himself. He has to go to Colón for that. Come back tomorrow. I spent the extra time in expeditions to the Chinese supermarket in Puerto Lindo. Tamsin and Theo had told me I wasn't eating enough protein. Old people need extra protein. I bought peanuts and more peanuts. I bought 30 onions, enough fresh veg to fill both fridges. I even turned up the beer fridge from 2 degrees to 10 degrees and moved some of the cans to the bilges. Then back to Linton Bay to Charlie in the hope that he would have some English breakfast tea. He'd never heard of it. So it was back to Puerto Lindo for 200 bags of Chinese black tea. Somehow, I don't think it's the same thing. Then it turned out that the iPad, which had been delivered first to Miami and then by independent courier to Panama City and finally collected by Felipe, was the wrong kind and wouldn't receive a GPS signal. I needed the kind that worked with a mobile phone signal. The helpful associate at Apple told me I could return it. But I do have a GPS dongle. Maybe that would work. All the same, I saved the box. I could put it on eBay when I get back to England. Day 0. The real one. Tuesday, 15th of April, 2025. And so, finally, I set off. Stowed the dinghy, dropped the Super Zero on deck to see whether the top of the halyard had chafed. I put a bit of tape around it for good measure, and set off with no more ceremony than you would expect from someone going back to the San Blas now that they'd loaded with beer from the fuel station and low denomination dollars from the ATM. What I did not do was make a return trip to the Chinese supermarket for half a dozen rolls of kitchen paper. I'm aware that I haven't made a proper list of stores for this voyage, not like the enthusiastic calorie counting of the lockdown cruise in Oldmansailing. I suppose I'm becoming blasé. But at the last minute, I realized I had about 10 sheets left, and the spares I thought were stowed in the forecastle turned out to be loo rolls. Kitchen paper is a big thing aboard Samsara. We get through mountains of the stuff. What with engine maintenance, first aid, blowing the skipper's nose, I did consider delaying my departure, but in the end I decided kitchen paper was a luxury. I had plenty of loo rolls, see above. Also, I had a bag of rags, old tea towels and chopped up T-shirts. It wasn't as if I was setting off without WD-40 or Pringles. All the same, this is going to be the longest voyage I have undertaken. Maybe that was why I wanted to get on with it. I have noticed that the sailors I meet in waterfront bars and beach barbecues all tend to be enthusiastic about the places they visit. I always find the ports seem to blend together. It's the bits in between that I remember. The getting there. The voyage. I sent the family WhatsApp group a message. "I'm off," Tamsin replied. "I thought you were going in May." Now I know why everyone else is going through the Panama Canal. According to the Windy app, I could expect northerly winds for the first 2 days, bang on the nose, but after that they would veer. The further north I went, the sooner I would be screaming along on a beam reach in 15 knots. After 4 days, when I turned left for Colombia, the wind would be on the quarter. But it was the first 24 hours that were going to be the problem. I was driven west, straight into the approaches to the Panama Canal. South Coast sailors, South Coast of England sailors, that is, tend to get very blasé about shipping. The Dover Strait, they are fond of reminding anyone who will listen, is the busiest waterway in the world. I'm not sure the person who first said this had actually been to Panama. The plotter was filled with little green triangles. At dusk, a particularly persistent tanker kept heading straight for me. I waited until he came within 2 miles, wondering why he wasn't choosing to go down one side or the other, and then thought about it from his point of view. He was steering a rock-steady course. Big ships always do. I was steering with the Aries. Each wave knocked the bow down to leeward. My course must have looked like a dog sniffing lampposts. Maybe the ship was still deciding which way to jump. I tacked off to the east and let him go by. But if I did that with every ship on a collision course, I would never get anywhere. A couple of hours later, with something called the Melissa Eleanor bearing down on me, I stood my ground. On and on came the Melissa Eleanor at an implacable 10.7 knots. I was averaging 4.3. What's that? 15 knots of closing speed? It didn't take long. He slipped by, a mile to weather. I decided to go to bed and let everybody else look out for themselves. Mind you, I did find myself setting the alarm for as little as 5 minutes. Other times, when the screen was empty, it would be 45, and then I would wake to find myself in the middle of Piccadilly Circus. That was the voyage number 2, Panama to the Isle of Man, by John Passmore, and read by the author. If you'd like to know what happens next, we'll be returning to this book in 9 weeks' time. Alternatively, it is available on Amazon in Kindle edition, paperback, and also as an Audible book. Until next week, goodbye.